I spent 6 months scraping paint and sanding floors to build my sanctuary, only to find my lock changed and my sister living inside. My mother told me to be the bigger person. So I went to the police and showed them exactly who the legal owner was. This is where the story truly begins, and you won't want to miss what happens. Make sure you're subscribed to see it through to the end. We're always curious. Where in the world are you all watching from today? Let us know in the comments. The exhaustion I felt that Tuesday wasn't just physical. It was the bone-deep weariness that comes from stripping century-old varnish off a Victorian staircase for 10 hours straight. I was a historical restoration specialist, a job title that sounded romantic to some, but mostly involved inhaling dust, battling rot, and trying to save things that others had given up on. I parked my beat-up sedan on the street, staring up at the second-floor window of the brownstone. My brownstone. Well, my apartment in a triplex I had miraculously secured with a down payment that represented 5 years of skipped vacations, bagged lunches, and overtime. The light in the living room was on. That was the first thing that made my stomach turn over. I was meticulous about turning off lights. Electricity cost money, and I didn't have money to burn. Maybe I forgot, I muttered to myself, grabbing my heavy canvas bag from the passenger seat. Maybe I was just too tired this morning. I trudged up the concrete steps, the familiar ache in my lower back flaring up. I reached for my keys, the brass set with the little miniature trowel keychain my best friend had given me as a housewarming gift. I slotted the key into the deadbolt. It didn't turn. I frowned, jiggling it. Sometimes the weather made the old door stick. I pulled it out, blew on the lock, and tried again. It slid in, but it wouldn't rotate. It hit a hard, mechanical stop. Panic, cold and sharp, pricked at the back of my neck. I looked closely at the hardware. It was shiny. Newer. The scratches I had made last week when I fumbled with my groceries were gone. Someone had changed the lock. My heart began to hammer against my ribs. Was I being evicted? Impossible. I owned the unit. Had I been broken into? I pulled out my phone, my fingers trembling as I dialed the one person who had a spare key, for emergencies only. My mother, Deborah, answered on the second ring. Her voice was light, airy, completely at odds with the terror constricting my throat. "Hi, Alice. I was just about to call you." "Mom," I choked out, staring at the impassable door. "I'm at the apartment. My key doesn't work. The lock is different. Did something happen? Did you have to let a locksmith in?" There was a pause on the line, a hesitation that lasted just a second too long. "Oh, right," Deborah said. Her tone shifted. It wasn't apologetic. It was the tone she used when she was explaining to a child why they couldn't have candy before dinner. Dismissive, matter of fact. "We didn't think you'd be home this early. Look, don't make a scene, okay?" "Make a scene?" I asked, my voice rising. "Mom, I can't get into my house. What is going on?" "We let Nicola move in," she said. The world seemed to tilt on its axis. "What?" "Nicola," she repeated, slower this time, as if I were simple. "She's having a terrible time, Alice. The divorce is getting messy. She needed a safe place, and your father and I agreed that your apartment was the best option. It's fully furnished, it's clean, and she needs the stability right now." I gripped the phone so hard my knuckles turned white. "You gave my apartment to Nicola, without asking me." "Asking would have just caused an argument," Deborah sighed. "You know how you get. You're so territorial. Nicola is your sister. She's family. And honestly, Alice, you're 25. You're single. You can just move back home for a few months until she gets back on her feet. It's not a big deal." "Not a big deal," I whispered. "I just finished the renovations. I just moved my bed in." "And it looks lovely," she says. "She's very comfortable. Just come to the house, we made pot roast. We can talk about it calmly without you getting hysterical." She hung up. I stood there on the porch, the dial tone buzzing in my ear like a hornet. The betrayal wasn't just a sting, it was a physical blow. It wasn't just that they had taken my home, it was that they didn't even think I deserved to be asked. To them, my ownership, my hard work, my life, it was all just a placeholder until Nicola needed it. The betrayal was worse than the diagnosis of the rot I dealt with at work. At least rot didn't pretend to love you before the floor gave way. I didn't leave the porch immediately. I couldn't. My legs felt like they were filled with wet cement. I stared at the new lock, the shiny brass mocking me. Inside, I saw a shadow move across the window. Nicola, my older sister. I could picture her in there, SH. E was probably sitting on the vintage velvet sofa I had spent 3 weekends steam cleaning, drinking wine out of the crystal glasses I had found at an estate sale. She was probably critiquing the paint color I had agonized over, sage whisper, telling herself it was a bit too drab for her taste, but it would do for now. My phone buzzed again, a text from my father, Michael. "Mom says you're upset. Don't be selfish, Alice. Family helps family. Your room here is ready. See you at dinner." Selfish. The word echoed in my head, triggering a cascade of memories. I was selfish when I didn't want Nicola to borrow my prom dress, which she returned with a cigarette burn. I was selfish when I used my scholarship money for books instead of loaning it to Nicola for her modeling portfolio photos. I was selfish for moving out in the first place, leaving my parents in that big, empty house. I walked back down the steps, my boots crunching on the gravel. I sat in my car, the engine cold, and just breathed. In, out, in, out. I needed to understand the scale of this. They hadn't just crashed at my place. They had replaced the locks. That required premeditation. That required calling a locksmith, showing up, probably lying about losing the key, paying for the service, and physically barring me from entry. My mother had the spare key. I had given it to her the day I closed on the property. "Just in case, sweetie," she had said, hugging me, "in case you lose yours or get locked out." I had trusted her. I had handed her the weapon she used to shoot me in the back. I looked at the house again. It wasn't a mansion. It was a fixer-upper in a gentrifying neighborhood. When I bought it, it smelled like mildew and cat urine. The floors were buckled. The walls had holes. "You're making a mistake," Nicola had laughed when I showed them the listing photos a year ago. "You, a homeowner, you make dirt wages, Alice. You'll be drowning in debt in a month. Just marry rich like I did." Now she was inside the home she mocked, taking shelter in the stability I built. I started the car. My instinct, the old instinct, the conditioned response of the younger sister, was to drive to my parents' house. To eat the pot roast. To cry and beg them to understand. To let them gaslight me into believing that I was the unreasonable one for wanting to live in the apartment I paid for. They expected me to come home. They expected me to yell, to cry, and then eventually to fold. That was the dynamic. Nicola took, I gave, and our parents applauded her for taking and scolded me for not giving enough. But as I put the car in gear, I looked at the passenger seat. My bag was there. And inside the side pocket, tucked into a plastic folder, were my documents. I carried them everywhere lately, because I was still finalizing the permits for the window replacements. I had the deed, I had the mortgage papers, I had the utility bills in my name. Deborah and Michael thought they were dealing with the 20-year-old Alice who cried when her sister stole her boyfriend. They thought they were dealing with the daughter who sought their approval like a flower seeks the sun. But they had forgotten one crucial thing. I worked in restoration. I knew how to strip away the rot to find the solid structure underneath, and I knew exactly where the property lines were drawn. I didn't turn left toward my parents' house. I turned right toward the downtown precinct. To understand why this hurt so much, you have to understand Nicola. Nicola is 7 years older than me. She was born beautiful, the kind of beauty that makes adults stop in the street and coo. By the time she was 5, she knew she was the center of the universe, and my parents, Deborah and Michael, were happy to orbit her. I was the accident, the afterthought. I was plain, studious, and sturdy. While Nicola was being driven to ballet and pageant coaching, I was in the backyard building forts out of scrap wood and learning how to fix the lawnmower because Dad couldn't be bothered. Nicola's life was a curated series of triumphs. She was the prom queen. She went to a private college, paid for by a second mortgage on my parents' house. She married a hedge fund manager named Todd when she was 24. When I announced I wanted to go into historical restoration and learn carpentry and masonry, Nicola actually laughed at the dinner table. "So you want to be a janitor for old houses?" She had sneered, sipping her wine. "Alice, that's manual labor. It's dirty. You'll ruin your hands." "It's preservation," I had argued. "It's saving history." "It's for people who can't get real jobs," Deborah had chimed in, patting Nicola's hand. "Why can't you be more like your sister? She's running the charity gala this year." For years, I saved. I lived in a studio apartment the size of a shoebox. I ate instant noodles. I picked up extra shifts on weekends. I learned everything I could about property values, structural integrity, and renovation costs. When I finally bought the apartment, it was my victory. It was the physical manifestation of my independence. Nicola, meanwhile, had spent the last 8 years spending Todd's money. Her career was vague. She called herself a lifestyle consultant, which mostly meant posting photos of her brunch on Instagram and buying designer handbags. But cracks had appeared in the golden child's life recently. Todd had been seen with a younger woman. Nicola's credit cards had been declined. The rumors were flying that the prenup was ironclad and Nicola was about to be cut loose with nothing but her wardrobe. I knew she was desperate. I just didn't think she was predatory. I pulled into the parking lot of the police station. The building was gray, imposing, and utterly devoid of warmth. It was perfect. As I gathered my papers, my phone rang again. It was Nicola this time. I stared at the screen. I shouldn't answer. I should just walk in. But I needed to hear it. I needed to hear the entitlement from her own lips to steel myself for what I was about to do. I swiped answer and put it on speaker, laying the phone on my dashboard. "Alice," her voice was tight, high-pitched. "Mom said you're freaking out." "I'm not freaking out, Nicola," I said calmly. "I'm just wondering why you're in my apartment." "Oh my God, don't be dramatic," she huffed. "Todd kicked me out, like literally locked me out of the estate. I had nowhere to go. Mom said your place was empty all day anyway." "It's not empty. I live there." "Barely," she scoffed. "You're always working at those dusty construction sites. Look, this place is cute. Small, but cute. I can make it work. I already started moving some of your ugly boxes to the basement storage to make room for my clothes." My breath hitched. "You moved my things." "Well, I couldn't fit my racks in otherwise. And honestly, Alice, that couch, it smells like grandma's. I'm going to have to order a new one. But don't worry, I'll let you keep it when I move out. Consider it an upgrade." "When are you moving out?" I asked. "I don't know," she said breezily. "Divorces take time. Maybe a year, maybe 2. I need to make sure I get my settlement. Mom and Dad said you're fine with moving back home. They miss you anyway. You should be grateful. You get free rent and home-cooked meals, and I get a sanctuary to heal. It's a win-win." "And the locks." "I couldn't risk Todd coming here," she said, her voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. "He's crazy, Alice. I had to secure the perimeter. Mom gave me permission." "Mom doesn't own the apartment, Nicola. I do." "Same difference," she snapped, losing patience. "It's family property. Look, I have to go. The cable guy is here. You didn't even have premium channels set up. We're fixing that. Bye." The line went dead. She was installing cable. She had moved my belongings to the basement. She viewed my home, my sanctuary, as nothing more than a temporary storage unit for her life, something she was entitled to commandeer because her life was more important. She truly believed that because she was the pretty one, the one in distress, the rules of property and respect didn't apply to her. She thought I was just the little sister, the worker bee who would buzz away back to the hive when told. I looked down at the lease agreement in my hand. It was stamped, notarized, and legal. My hand stopped trembling. I wasn't the little sister anymore. I was the homeowner, and I was about to introduce Nicola to the real world. I opened the car door and stepped out into the cool night air. I walked toward the glass doors of the precinct, clutching the folder to my chest like a shield. The reception area of the 12th precinct smelled of floor wax and stale coffee. It was a stark, fluorescent-lit purgatory that felt a world away from the warm, curated aesthetic of the apartment I had just been locked out of. I stood at the high counter, my hands flat on the cool laminate, trying to stop them from shaking. The desk sergeant, a man with graying temples and a nameplate that read SGT. Miller looked up from his computer with a weary expression. He had the look of a man who had heard every variation of a domestic dispute 10 times before lunch. "Can I help you, miss?" he asked, his voice rough. "I need to report a breaking and entering," I said. My voice was steadier than I expected. It was my site manager voice, the one I used when a contractor tried to use subpar lumber on a load-bearing wall. "And I need an officer to accompany me to my property to remove the intruder." Miller sighed, leaning back in his chair. "Okay, who's inside? Boyfriend? Ex-husband?" "My sister," I said. He paused, his eyes narrowing slightly. "Miss, if it's a family dispute, that's usually a civil matter, if you let her in." "I didn't let her in," I interrupted, sliding the plastic folder across the counter. "I opened it to tea." He deed the fresh mortgage statement and the certificate of occupancy. "This is the deed to the property. It is in my name, solely. There are no other tenants on the lease, no other occupants listed on the insurance." I took a breath, channeling the cold precision of the law rather than the hot tears of a daughter. I left for work at 7:00 a.m. When I returned at 6:00 p.m., the locks had been drilled out and replaced. The individual inside does not have a key, does not have a lease, and does not have my permission to be there. She has been on the premises for less than 6 hours. In this state, tenancy requires 30 days of residency or a written agreement. She has neither. This is criminal trespass and destruction of property. Miller looked from me to the documents. He picked up the deed, scanning the stamps and the dates. He looked at the photo of the lock mechanism I had snapped on my phone before leaving the porch, which I held up for him to see. "She drilled the lock," he asked, "and replaced it without the owner's consent. And she refuses to leave. She told me she was moving in. I told her she had no right. She hung up on me." I leaned in closer. "Officer, I work in historical restoration. I have thousands of dollars of specialized tools and materials in that apartment. I also have sensitive architectural blueprints for city contracts. The person inside is volatile and currently securing the premises against me. I am afraid for the safety of my property." It was a slight exaggeration. My tools were mostly in my van, but I needed to escalate the stakes. I needed him to see this not as a sisterly spat, but as a property crime. Miller scrutinized me. He saw the dust on my work boots, the paint on my jeans, the sheer exhaustion in my eyes, and the organized, notarized paperwork in my hand. He nodded slowly. "If she claims she lives there," he started a final test. "She can't," I cut in. "Check her license. It will list her husband's address in the suburbs. Check her mail. It goes to the suburbs. She has a suitcase and a bottle of wine. That is not residency. That is a break-in." Miller picked up his radio. "I'm going to send a unit for a civil standby to keep the peace while you regain entry. If she can't prove residency, we'll ask her to vacate. But if she produces a key..." "She won't have the original key," I said. "She'll have the one she just illegally installed." "Take a seat," Miller said, typing something into his terminal. "Officers Reynolds and Battista are coming in now. They'll follow you over." I sat on the hard plastic bench, clutching my folder. My phone was vibrating incessantly in my pocket. "Mom, Mom, Dad, Nicola, Mom." I didn't look at the texts. I knew what they would say. They would be variations of "How dare you?" "She's your sister," and "Don't be selfish." They relied on the social contract of family to bypass the legal contract of law. They assumed that because we shared DNA, I would absorb the violation. They banked on my silence. But as I watched Officer Reynolds, a tall woman with a no-nonsense demeanor, walk toward me, I realized something. My silence had a price tag, and they had finally exceeded my budget. "Alice," Reynolds asked, "let's go get your house back." The drive back to the apartment felt surreal. I drove my sedan, and in the rearview mirror, the blue and white cruiser followed close behind. The flashing lights weren't on, but the presence was heavy, undeniable. When we pulled up to the curb, the living room light was still on. I saw a shadow move across the blinds. I got out of the car. Officers Reynolds and Battista joined me on the sidewalk. "Let us do the talking initially," Reynolds instructed. "We just want to ascertain the situation." I nodded, my heart thumping a frantic rhythm against my ribs. We walked up the steps. I didn't reach for my keys, they were useless now. I simply knocked. Hard. There was a muffled sound inside, then footsteps. The door opened. Nicola stood there. She was wearing a silk kimono robe over her clothes, holding a glass of red wine. Her hair was perfectly tousled. When she saw me, her eyes narrowed in annoyance, but when her gaze shifted to the two uniformed officers behind me, the glass in her hand wobbled. "What is this?" she asked, her voice jumping an octave. "Alice, are you serious?" "Ma'am, step out onto the porch, please," Officer Reynolds said calmly, her hand resting near her belt. It wasn't aggressive, but it was commanding. I live here," Nicola stammered, trying to adopt the haughty tone she used with waitstaff. "My sister is just being hysterical. We're having a family disagreement." "She does not live here," I said clearly. "Officer, ask her for her ID." "I don't have to show you anything," Nicola snapped at me, then turned a winning smile to Battista. "Officer, look, I'm going through a very difficult divorce. My parents, who, by the way, paid for this apartment, told me I could. LD, stay here. My sister is just jealous because." "Stop," I said. The word was quiet, but it cut through the air like a chisel. I opened the folder. I pulled out the deed and the bank transfer records for the down payment. "Officer Reynolds," I said, handing her the papers. "My parents did not pay for this apartment. I did, every cent. The mortgage is in my name. The down payment came from my savings account. Here is the transaction history. My parents have zero equity in this property. Their permission is irrelevant." Reynolds scanned the documents under the porch light. She looked at Nicola. "Ma'am, is your name on the deed or the lease?" "Well, no, but..." "Is your name on any utility bills for this address?" "I just got here today, I told you," Nicola cried, her composure cracking. "My mother gave me the key, it's a family property." "My mother had an emergency spare," I corrected, "which she gave to this woman without my consent, and then this woman changed the locks. Officer, ask her where the old lock is." Nicola went pale. "Ma'am," Reynolds said, her voice dropping the friendly community policing tone and adopting the compliance tone. "If you cannot prove residency, and the legal owner is standing here telling you to leave, you are trespassing. The changing of the locks without ownership is destruction of property. You have two choices. You can gather your personal belongings and leave immediately, or we can place you under arrest for criminal mischief and trespassing." "You can't arrest me," Nicola shrieked. She looked at me, her eyes wide with shock. She had never been told no by an authority figure in her life. She expected the officers to wink and say, "Work it out, ladies." "Alice, tell them to stop. You're embarrassing me. The neighbors are watching." I looked at the house next door. Mrs. Higgins was indeed peering through her curtains. I didn't care. "I want her out," I said to Reynolds. "Now." "You heard the lady," Battista said, stepping forward. "Let's go, ma'am. Grab your bag, leave the wine." "I have boxes," Nicola wailed. I moved boxes in. "You can arrange a time with the owner to retrieve them later," Reynolds said. "Right now, you are leaving." Nicola threw a look of pure, distilled venom at me. "Mom is going to kill you," she hissed. "You ungrateful little brat. Dad is going to cut you off." "He can't cut me off," I said, stepping past her to enter my own hallway. "I pay for my own life. Get out of my house, Nicola." I watched from the doorway as the officers escorted her to her car. a sleek Mercedes that looked ridiculous parked behind the police cruiser. She threw her suitcase into the trunk with enough force to dent it. She spent 5 minutes furiously typing on her phone before peeling away from the curb. Officer Reynolds turned to me. "I'd suggest you call a locksmith tonight, miss, and maybe get a camera." "Already on it," I said, my voice trembling now that the adrenaline was fading. "Thank you." "Nice restoration work, by the way," Battista said, glancing at the crown molding in the entryway. "Hard to find that level of detail these days." "Thanks," I whispered. "I did it myself." I didn't sleep that night. I sat in the living room, staring at the fresh gouges in the doorframe where the locksmith had done his work. I had paid an emergency premium to have high-security cylinders installed, the kind that couldn't be drilled. My phone had become a radioactive brick. I had silenced it, but the screen lit up every few minutes. 47 missed calls, 82 text messages. At 3:00 a.m., I finally picked it up. "Mom, you called the police on your sister? Have you lost your mind?" "Dad, this is shameful behavior, Alice. You have humiliated this family." "Nicola, I hope you rot in that house alone. You're disgusting." They weren't asking why. They weren't apologizing for the invasion. They were only furious that I had broken the code of silence. I walked through the apartment, assessing the damage. Nicola had been there less than a day, but her mark was everywhere. My carefully organized bookshelf had been shoved aside. A ring of red wine stained the untreated oak of my side table. And then I saw it. In the corner of the dining room, behind the stack of ugly boxes Nicola had mentioned, was a large, gray plastic tote bin. It was taped shut with heavy-duty duct tape. It was odd. Nicola wasn't a duct tape and tote bin kind of person. She was a Louis Vuitton luggage and professional movers kind of person. Curiosity pricked at me. I grabbed a utility knife from my tool belt and sliced through the tape. Inside, wrapped in layers of cashmere sweaters, were stacks of documents. And below those, several velvet jewelry pouches. I opened one pouch, a diamond tennis bracelet. Another held a heavy gold Rolex, a man's watch. A third held stacks of cash, thick bands of $100 bills. I sat back on my heels. This wasn't a clothes for the week bag. This was a go bag. I picked up the documents. They were bank statements, but not Nicola's. They were joint accounts for her and Todd's business holdings, and there were withdrawals, massive ones, systematically drained over the last 3 weeks. "She's not just divorced," I whispered to the empty room. "She's running." The narrative my mother had spun, that Todd was crazy and had kicked her out, suddenly looked very different. You don't get kicked out with the family silver and $50,000 in cash unless you planned it. I needed to know the truth, and I knew who would have it. I waited until 7:00 a.m., then I called Todd. He answered on the first ring, his voice sounded wrecked. "Hello, who is this?" "It's Alice," I said, "Nicola's sister." There was a long silence, then a bitter laugh. "Oh, great. Calling to threaten me too? Or did she send you to pick up the rest of the stuff she stole?" "I don't know what you're talking about, Todd," I said carefully. "But Nicola isn't with me. I kicked her out last night. The police were involved." You kicked her out?" Todd's voice changed. The hostility evaporated, replaced by confusion. "Deborah told me you were hiding her. She said you and Nicola were aligned against me." "Deborah lied," I said. "Todd, why is Nicola really leaving? And why did I find a bin full of cash and watches in my dining room?" "She has my watch." Todd sounded like he was going to cry. "That was my grandfather's. Alice, listen to me. I didn't kick her out. She disappeared 3 days ago. I came home and the accounts were empty. The business operating account, the savings, everything. She forged my signature on a transfer. My lawyer is preparing a forensic accounting audit, but right now, I can't even pay my staff." "She told Mom you were abusive," I said, the pieces clicking together like a terrible puzzle. "She told your mom that because I found out she was having an affair with her personal trainer," Todd said, his voice flat. "I served her papers. She retaliated by liquidating everything she could touch and running to the one place she thought I wouldn't look. Your parents' house, or yours. I looked at the bin again. She was using my apartment as a safe house, I realized. She changed the locks not to keep you out, but to keep me out so I wouldn't find the money. Alice, Todd said, urgency returning to his voice. I have a court order freezing her assets. If she has that cash, she's in contempt of court. It's grand larceny. I have it, I said. It's safe, but Todd, I need you to send me that court order and the proof of the transfers. I'll email them right now. What are you going to do? I'm going to have a talk with our parents, I said. An hour later, I was printing the documents Todd had sent. The timeline was irrefutable. The affair, the filing for divorce, the sudden withdrawals, the flight. A heavy pounding on my door made me jump. I checked the new camera feed on my phone. It was Deborah and Michael, and they didn't look happy. I opened the door, leaving the chain latch on. Alice Marie, Deborah screamed through the crack. Open this door immediately. Nicola is in a hotel. A hotel. Do you have any idea how traumatic this is for her? We are disgusted with you, Michael added, his face red. Calling the police on your own flesh and blood? You are going to apologize to her, and you are going to give her a key, and you are going to do it now. She didn't tell you, did she? I asked calmly through the gap. Tell us what, that her husband is a monster, Deborah spat. No, I said. That she stole $200,000 from his company and is hiding it in my apartment to avoid jail time. Deborah froze. That's a lie, Nicola wouldn't. I have the bank records, Mom, I said, holding up the papers. And I have the court order, and I have the bag of cash she left in my dining room. She didn't come here for stability. She came here to hide the evidence of a felony, and she used you and me to do it. I saw the doubt flicker in Michael's eyes. He looked at Deborah. Deb, what is she talking about? She's lying, Deborah shrieked, but her voice lacked its usual conviction. She's just jealous. She's making it up to hurt Nicola. I'm not the one who changed the locks, Mom, I said. I'm going to give you a choice. You can leave my porch and stop harassing me, or I can call the police again. And this time, I'll show them what's in the gray bin, and then Nicola won't be in a hotel. She'll be in a cell. Deborah stared at me, her mouth opening and closing. For the first time in my life, she didn't look at me with pity or disdain. She looked at me with fear. You wouldn't, she whispered. Try me, I said. I slammed the door and locked the new deadbolt. I leaned against the wood, my heart racing. I had bought myself some time, but I knew Nicola, she wouldn't stop. She needed that money, and she needed to destroy the person who had taken it from her. I looked at the gray bin. The endgame was coming. The summons came not from my parents, but from my Aunt Linda. Linda was the matriarch of the extended family, the keeper of the peace, and the amplifier of gossip. Her text was brief and chilling. Family meeting at your parents' house. 6:00 p.m. Do not be late. We need to resolve this theft matter before it destroys your sister's life. Theft matter. Nicola hadn't just denied the embezzlement, she had flipped the script. She had told the extended family, the aunts, uncles, and cousins who made up our tight-knit social circle, that I was the thief, that I was holding her assets hostage. I stood in my kitchen, the gray bin sitting on the table like a lead weight. I could have just given it to the police immediately. I could have stayed home and let them handle it. But that wouldn't clear my name. If I didn't face this now, in front of the audience Nicola had assembled, I would forever be the jealous little sister who tried to ruin Nicola's fresh start. I needed a witness. I picked up my phone and dialed Todd. I'm going to my parents' house, I said when he answered. They're holding a tribunal. Nicola is there. I'm bringing the bin. I'm coming with you, Todd said instantly. My lawyer advised me not to engage with her directly, but if she's accusing you of theft, that changes things. I'll meet you there. Park down the street, I instructed. Wait for my text. I drove to my childhood home with a sense of grim finality. The house, a sprawling colonial that my parents struggled to maintain, was lit up like a Christmas tree. Nicola's Mercedes was in the driveway, alongside Aunt Linda's SUV and Uncle Jerry's truck. She had called in the cavalry. I walked in the front door, the heavy plastic bin in my arms. The conversation in the living room died instantly. They were all there. My parents looking exhausted and righteous, Aunt Linda with her arms crossed and lips pursed, Uncle Jerry looking uncomfortable, and Nicola. Nicola was center stage, curled up in the wingback chair, clutching a tissue. Her eyes were red-rimmed, a perfect performance of victimhood. "You have a lot of nerve," Aunt Linda said, her voice shaking with disappointment. "Stealing your sister's jewelry, her settlement money? Alice, we raised you better than this." "I didn't steal anything," I said, setting the heavy bin down on the coffee table with a loud thud. The sound made Nicola flinch. "She locked me out," Nicola wailed, looking at Uncle Jerry for sympathy. "She changed the locks and refused to let me get my things. She said she wouldn't give them back unless I paid her rent. It's blackmail." "Is that true, Alice?" my father asked, his voice stern. "Are you blackmailing your sister?" "I am not," I said calmly. I looked at Nicola. "I'm returning the property. But before I open this bin, I want everyone here to know exactly what is inside. Nicola, do you want to tell them, or should I?" Nicola sat up straighter, a flicker of panic in her eyes. "It's my personal savings. My jewelry, just give it to me." "It's cash," I said, addressing the room, "and men's watches and documents." "So," Deborah snapped, "it's hers." "It's $200,000 in cash, Mom," I said. The room went silent. Uncle Jerry's eyebrows shot up. 200 grand in a plastic bin. "She's lying," Nicola screamed. "It's not that much, it's just my emergency fund." "And where did you get an emergency fund of that size, Nicola?" I asked, stepping closer. "You haven't worked in 6 years. You don't have a checking account in your own name. Did Todd give it to you?" "Yes," she lied, desperate now. "It was part of the settlement and advance." "That's interesting," I said, "because I have the court order here." I pulled the folded papers from my back pocket. I didn't hand them to my parents, they would just tear them up. I handed them to Aunt Linda. "Read the highlighted paragraph, Aunt Linda," I said. Linda adjusted her glasses. Her lips moved silently as she read. Her face went pale. "What is it?" Michael asked. "It says," Linda's voice trembled. "It says that Nicola is strictly forbidden from liquidating or transferring any assets. It says there is an active warrant for her arrest regarding the theft of company funds via forged wire transfer." "That's fake," Nicola shrieked, jumping up. "She printed that off the internet. Alice is forging documents to frame me." "She's right," Deborah said, grasping at straws. "Alice is good with computers. She could have made that up. You know how jealous she is of Nicola's lifestyle." "I didn't make it up," I said, "and I didn't bring the only copy." I pulled out my phone and sent the text. "Now." The front door opened. The heavy footsteps of a man echoed in the hallway. Todd walked into the living room. He looked tired, thinner than the last time we had seen him, but his expression was mad. Of Stone, he wasn't the pushover husband anymore. He was the CEO who had been robbed. Nicola froze. Her face drained of all color, leaving her looking waxen and terrified. "Todd," Deborah whispered, "what are you doing here?" "I'm here for my property," Todd said coldly. He didn't even look at Deborah. He looked straight at Nicola. "And to make sure my sister-in-law doesn't go to jail for your crimes." "Todd, baby," Nicola stammered, putting on a shaky smile. "Let's talk about this. These people, they don't understand our arrangement." "We don't have an arrangement, Nicola," Todd said. "We have a felony case." He walked over to the bin and ripped off the duct tape I had resealed it with. He opened the lid. He pulled out the watch, the gold Rolex. "My grandfather's watch," he said, holding it up for the room to see. "You told me you lost this. You told me the cleaners stole it." I found it," Nicola whispered. "And the cash," Todd pointed to the stacks. "Did the cleaners steal that too?" He turned to my parents. "Your daughter forged my signature. She drained the payroll account for my company. I have 20 employees who might not get paid next week because she decided she needed a golden parachute. My father, Michael, sank onto the sofa. He looked from the cash to Todd to Nicola. The denial was finally breaking. The reality of what his golden child had done was settling in like wet concrete. But, Deborah stammered, but she said you were abusive. Todd laughed, a dry, humorless sound. I cut up her credit card because she spent $10,000 on a spa weekend while we were being audited. If that's abuse, then I'm guilty. But this, he gestured to the bin, this is grand larceny. I did it for us, Nicola screamed, finally dropping the mask. She turned on me, her face twisted into a snarl. You ruined everything, you petty, jealous little loser. I had a plan. I was going to go to Europe. I was going to be happy. And you just had to be the hero. She lunged at me. It happened in slow motion. Her manicured hands hooked into claws, aiming for my face. But she never reached me. Uncle Jerry, the quiet man who usually spent family gatherings watching football, stepped in front of me. He caught Nicola by the arms, holding her back easily. That's enough, Nicola, he rumbled. Get off me, she spit at him. You're all against me. I hate you. I hate all of you. Police. The voice came from the open front door. 2 officers, not the ones from the night before, but new ones, stepped into the hallway. Todd had called them from the car. Nicola Stevenson, the lead officer asked. Nicola stopped struggling. She looked at the police, then at the bin of money, then at her mother. Mom, she whimpered, reverting to the voice of a 5-year-old. Mommy, tell them to go away. Mommy, fix it. Deborah stood up. She took a step toward the officers, her instinct to protect her baby kicking in one last time. Officer, this is a misunderstanding, Deborah began. My daughter is just. Ma'am, step back, the officer said firmly. We have a warrant. They walked past my mother as if she were a piece of furniture. They took Nicola's wrists, pulled them behind her back, and clicked the handcuffs into place. The sound of the ratcheting metal was the loudest thing I had ever heard. Alice, Nicola screamed as they marched her out. Alice, tell them I live there. Tell them it's my money, Alice. I stood still. I watched my sister, the queen of our family, get dragged out into the night, kicking and screaming like a toddler who had been denied a toy. Todd closed the lid of the bin. He looked at me and nodded. Thank you, Alice. Just pay your employees, I said softly. I will. He picked up the bin and followed the police. The front door closed, leaving me alone in the living room with my family. The silence was thick, heavy, and suffocating. The silence stretched for a minute, then 2. Finally, Aunt Linda cleared her throat. She looked at my parents with a mixture of pity and disgust. I think I should go, she said. Jerry, let's go. I'm sorry, Alice, Uncle Jerry said as he passed me, squeezing my shoulder. We didn't know. I know you didn't, I said. When the door clicked shut behind them, I was left alone with Deborah and Michael. My mother was staring at the spot on the rug where Nicola had been standing. She looked older, smaller. The energy she usually spent managing the family narrative had evaporated. She'll need a lawyer, Deborah mumbled, almost to herself. Michael, we have to call the lawyer, we have to mortgage the house. Bail will be high. My father didn't answer. He was looking at me. You knew, Michael said to me. You knew she was going to be arrested. I knew she broke the law, I said. I gave her a chance to leave my apartment. She chose to lie. I gave you a chance to listen to me. You chose to scream at me. We're your parents, Deborah snapped, her head snapping up, a flash of the old fire returning. You don't ambush your parents. You humiliated us in front of Linda, in front of Todd. How could you be so cruel? I looked at her and I felt something snap. Not a violent snap, but a release. A tether that had been holding me to their approval for 25 years finally severed. Cruel? I asked, my voice steady and low. Cruel is watching me renovate a house for 6 months and never once offering to hold a paintbrush. Cruel is letting my sister steal my home the day I finished it. Cruel is calling me selfish because I didn't want to harbor a criminal. She made a mistake, Deborah cried. She was desperate. She's a thief, Mom, I said. And you enabled her. You've enabled her whole life. You taught her that she could take whatever she wanted, and if anyone objected, they were the problem. Well, the real world doesn't work like that. Todd doesn't work like that, and neither do I. So what? Michael asked, his voice bitter. Are you going to cut us off now? Punish us? I'm not punishing you, I said. I'm protecting myself, just like I protected my apartment. I reached into my pocket and pulled out the spare key, the one I had taken back from Nicola the night before. I placed it on the coffee table. I'm changing the locks again tomorrow, I said. Don't ask for a copy, you won't get one. Alice, Deborah gasped. You can't mean that, we're family. I know, I said, and that's the saddest part. Strangers treated me with more respect today than you did. I turned and walked toward the door. If you walk out that door, Deborah threatened, her voice rising to a shriek, don't expect us to come visiting. Don't expect Sunday dinners. I paused at the threshold. I looked back at the house I grew up in. I saw the wallpaper I had helped hang, the stairs I had learned to climb, the people who were supposed to love me unconditionally but had placed conditions on every breath I took. Mom, I said, I'm counting on it. I walked out. I didn't slam the door. I closed it gently, firmly, and walked to my car. The next few weeks were a blur of activity, but this time, it was the good kind. I finished the window restoration in the spare bedroom. I finally unpacked the last box. I bought a new rug for the living room, one that didn't smell like Nicola's perfume or cheap wine. Todd texted me a week later. The forensic audit was done. Nicola was looking at significant jail time, but he had offered a plea deal. If she returned every cent and agreed to a zero alimony divorce, he wouldn't push for the maximum sentence. She had taken it. She was currently living in a cheap motel on the outskirts of town, working part-time as a receptionist while she served her probation. My parents had tried to call, but I had blocked their numbers. Aunt Linda told me they were struggling, without Nicola's glamour to distract them, and with the shame of the arrest hanging over them, they were just two bitter people in a big, empty house. I was sitting on my porch one evening, drinking tea and watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of violet and gold. My neighbor, Mrs. Higgins, walked by with her dog. Lock working okay, dear, she called out. Works perfectly, Mrs. Higgins, I smiled. I looked at the brass key in my hand. It was just a piece of metal, but it felt heavy with significance. It wasn't just a tool to open a door, it was a declaration. I had stripped away the rot. I had sanded down the rough edges. I had removed the structure that was threatening to collapse, and I had built something solid in its place. I wasn't the selfish sister. I wasn't the backup plan. I was Alice, the historical restoration specialist. And for the first time in my life, my house and my peace was entirely my own.